Good morning, everyone. This is Ron. It's a little after 11 a.m. on Sunday morning. We'll go ahead and get started today. As usual, we'll see if we have any questions or anything that grabbed our attention last day or so. And on yesterday, we kind of fielded questions and talked in general. Uh, at the end, Pastor spoke to us about from Matthew chapter 4 and looking at the temptations, or at least introduced us to what Jesus is going through and how that relates to us. Uh, so we'll see where we go today, but as always, we'll start and see if we have any questions.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
This is morning. This is Angela. I had a question of you was talking about the stones yesterday. You just explain it a little bit more because I don't know if you're saying that the stones is that dealing with I'm just gonna say this the stuff that we're dealing with inside. You know.
Are you talking about the stones that Jesus was talking about when he was told to turn the stone into bread?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll get to that in a few. Okay.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions or comments prior to us entering that question, responding rather to the question that Angela brought to us?
Good morning, everyone. Reb, the question I have for you, and I want to say that I heard it correctly, or maybe I didn't hear it correctly. A Kabbalah means the mother of mankind, yet Africa comes from the word Afrik, that means without winter or without cold. So, if I heard it correctly, Reverend Richard, you stated that being that the name was changed, it still didn't have an effect on the energy of it. And I'm just in a little paradox with by changing the name, Africa meaning without winter or without cold, Babylon meaning the mother of mankind. Those are those meanings are not even the same. So I do feel by changing the name, it did have an impact on what's taking place, and those that side with, even with the name being changed, it didn't have a. That's cool too. But I just wanted to uh, make that statement that the word Africa comes from the word Afrik, that means without winter or without cold. Thank you.
Okay. Um, Anyone want? Oh, you asked me. Okay. If you plug in your lamp and then you change it and use that same plug and plug in your TV, you get the same energy, right?
I would say yes, yes.
Okay. So simply because you change what you're using it for, it did not change the energy source. What changed was our approach to it. The energy of Africa and what it is still there, regardless of what you call it. If it was not, if it was not still there, then everything in the earth would cease to exist, because especially human life, because this is where it started. Now, it also Kabbalah also means Garden of Eden. So when you say it changed the energy in it because of Afrik, no, it did not change the energy in it. The reason the Greeks gave it the name Afrik the place without winters. It's the same reason they brought into the vernacular the word that we translate as Ethiopia now. And that simply means the land of the black people or the land of the blacks. And that was because regardless of where they went in Africa, the people were the same. So what happened is in subsequent years, they began to indoctrinate those names into or introduce rather those names into the vernacular, and they became the primary names for Africa, and the name for Africa because they had all control of the educational process, and they had world dominance, and world dominance is can be looked at based upon history, his story. So his story was that it's not Ekebulon, but it is Africa, the land without winter. Now, the original name of Africa was understood by the originators of Catholicism, and they realized what the name that the Greeks had put forth for Kebulon. And what did they do? They could not have Africa being the Garden of Eden, so they went along with the name Africa, because God forbid if the Garden of Eden was Africa, or the Kebulon, or the mother of all mankind, that would mean that they had to embrace the reality that all people who look like them, regardless of who they are on this earth, came from the same place. Therefore, rather than tell the truth about it, they started talking about a search for the true Garden of Eden, and they searched Turkey, Syria, all these places in that area, when in reality they knew that the Garden of Eden was a spiritual place, and it was not anything physical about it at all. So you can call a cat a dog, but it's still a cat. And that cat is going to have the same energy as a cat, and not that of a dog, simply because you called it a dog. So the only ones who lost contact with the true understanding of it is us, when we were indoctrinated with a European education and a European religion called Christianity. And what happened even with the Hindus, the Jews, the Islam or Judaism, the same thing happened. They did not call it a Kebulon because of the true meaning of it, but it did not change the energy of it. And that is what, if the energy of it was changed, then we would not, we as descendants from that continent would not be the most forgiving folk on earth. We would not be the most spiritual people on earth if that energy had changed. Just because you change a word, it doesn't change the energy. Does that help you, sir?
Yes and no, Reverend Richard. However, I appreciate your answer. And I think Angie had asked a question
Oh,
really
I'm gonna deal
before
with
I
that.
asked my question.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna deal
Thank
with
you, though,
that.
but
Okay,
yes
well,
and no, Rev, but I appreciate your answer.
I want to know what your no is. Hello, George, are you talking?
Oh, no, sir, no, Rev. Like I say, there's some parts of what you stated I agree with. There's some parts of it is confusing to me because I
Which
can't forge an argument with
I'm
it.
not, no. This is not about an argument. This is about an understanding. So I
No,
want to know.
an argument wasn't the best word of it. It's just some parts of it I did agree with you on. Whether you say Africa or Kabbalah, I still recognize Imhotep as the father of medicine and a lot of father of uh, sociology, psychology. Um, yet it's just that part of why did they change that name? And
I just told you why they did it. Now, understand this: when we are teaching, we're not giving our opinion. This is not an opinion. This is not an opinion-based response at all. They changed the name because they never saw a winter in that part of the world, and that name became prevalent, especially when they realized what the true name meant, and they continued to use that name, and they forced it upon everyone else through subtle indoctrination. So I hope that is not confusing. Just like they forced the name to us as colored people or Negroes, or the other N word. But did that make us that? No. It actually did not change the essence of who we are. It changed their opinion about who we are in an effort to change our opinion about who we are. It was they saw it as an opportunity to control by virtue uh, um, of what is it? Making you feel inferior by virtue of what they called you. But that did not change our energy. If it had, we wouldn't have had a red light. Now would we have air conditioning or ironing board and stuff like that, because all that stuff that we are found comfort from came from the soul of the African. And that was during the period and after the period of enslavement in this nation. So beyond that, I don't know what else to bring some clarity to that. Okay.
now I'm more up to speed with it, Reb. I'm more up to speed with it. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Anyone else?
I think the another way of looking at that is turning it around what you said. I see it more as an internal thing with man more than a geographical place. And we think about Africa, we think about the landmass and that sort of thing, when really it was all about controlling trying to control the mind of the African. And if I can make you feel less than me, I can change everything about you. So it's not, whether you're talking about Africa or man, it's the same energy. And the motivator was to control the people. So, for example, if you look at us and all we have gone through in the last few years, trying to uncover truth. Where's the truth? The truth is in us. We're discovering who we are because we've been covered over with religion, with fear, with everything that has been thrown at us. And as we do so, one of the last things that we're dealing with is this name for Africa. And remember, that's talking about consciousness. So what it is saying to us is all that you have gone through, all that you have dug, trying to dig yourself out as the plant tries to reach the surface to the sun, what you are seeing is you are who you truly are and the energy that you truly are. And that is being refreshing to us. On the other hand, you see those who think because I have been elected to the Supreme Court, I have arrived. I am a senator running for president. I have arrived. There is no discrimination because I can do what I want to do, and I don't see anything else. So we covered over with stuff, with aggravation and with turmoil, and some of us have taken comfort in that, but some of us continue to dig and move for the truth. So it wasn't about the landmass. It is about controlling the mind of the African. And that is probably where the confusion comes in if we try to see it from any other viewpoint. So don't know if that adds anything to it. Kind of what I see.
Yeah, good morning, Ron. Good morning, everyone. I appreciate, the conversation that we're having in terms of spiritual enlightenment. And in the Akibalan, it talked about the mother of mankind or Garden of Eden, but I think the balance of us being able to appreciate the masculine and feminine energy, not looking at it in terms of landmass, but looking in terms of the spiritual aspect of us being able to appreciate the oldest, only word for this indigenous origin. So again, I think that there's various languages, but I still, or as Pastor you mentioned, that it comes from that source. And so as things transpire, from that point of time, I think again, being able to appreciate what do we mean when we say the mother of mankind or the Garden of Eden. So I just wanted to, mention that in Paris. I don't know if you might want to, expound on that, but the mother of mankind, what does that really mean? That's my question. I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you, Tehran. The mother of mankind simply is saying that this is the origin of all mankind. This is the womb from which all of mankind came. If you look at it from a spiritual point of view, it is talking about the spiritual essence emanated from the spiritual womb that existed in Akibalan, and that is in that air, that landmass. And also, if you look at it physically, everyone on the face of the earth has a common gene, and it is called the African gene because of the origin of all of humanity. So it is both, it is a spiritual reality manifested in the body of all humans. So the physicality of it does exist in genes. The spirituality of it does exist in the consciousness of humanity, whether humanity accepts it or not. Does that help, or or is it clear, George, Ron?
No, that definitely helps. And I
Okay.
think when you mention it, I think again in terms of the name, the Eve gene, I believe is what it is. But
Yeah.
again, definitely that helps. That helps.
Right. And thank you. Go ahead.
In addition, and this is not to take us off topic, I think it'll just undergird it. There was this man found in Europe called a Cheddar Man, and
Yeah.
they'd been looking at his DNA to see what he really looked like. And lo and behold, once they did everything they could to study the DNA, the color of the eyes, the color of the skin, all of that, when they unveiled him, he was a black man with blue eyes, a bluish tinged eyes. So everybody was surprised, especially Europeans, Britons, because they thought that the Cheddar Man, who was thousands of years old, would look like the way they look now, but their ancestor was a man of color. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
My
Go ahead.
question was gonna be, is the African gene related to melanin or what?
It is. The African gene would have to be related to melanin, and it is, because without melanin, there's absolutely no life on the earth, period. There's no life anyplace if it were not for the melanin. And if you look at, just take the people, humans, out of the equation, and if you look at melanin as a black marble, and that marble begins to release melanin throughout the universe. And what do you begin to see? You begin to see that the amount of melanin lessens the further away you get from the original source of melanin. And that is the reason the African is melanated to the extent that it is, because it is the source of that life, and the reason that the Europeans are far less melanated than is the African. Does that help, Audrey? Hello? Audrey, if you're talking, you're muted.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, okay. Now that, and I want us to keep in mind, we have been so doggone indoctrinated with race until we began to see these, what we are talking about, we began to see it as being something that's superior. It is not. It's not, this has nothing to do with superiority. It has nothing to do with race. This is talking about the reality of mankind. Why? Because the Creator allowed all of this to take place for the express purpose of bringing humans to a place of understanding that they are Elohim. And in order for us to be Elohim, we have to create a consciousness that is the same consciousness as it is above. And that's what we are in the process of doing. But we have to eliminate from our thought pattern, we have to eliminate from our speech this whole idea of inferiority and superiority when it comes to race. And yes, doing that is one of the most difficult things to eliminate from our thought patterns and from our speech, because of how deeply ingrained it is. If the two things that are deeply ingrained to the extent that is extremely difficult to eliminate them, the most difficult one is race, and the second most difficult one is misogyny. With race, everything is based on the inferiority of everyone who does not look like a European. That has to go. Misogyny, because I'm stronger than you, the Machiavellian concept, might makes right. Because I'm stronger than the woman, I dominate her, and she has to be my servant. She does what I say. That kind of attitude has to be eliminated. And when we are able to have these discussions and have no sense of it speaking of racial inequality or racial superiority or whatever, when we see this as a spiritual journey, a spiritual event that we have to handle, because we are the ones who are to bring balance, harmony to ourselves, then the earth. This idea of bringing harmony to ourselves means that you have to be balanced in how you perceive yourself. Even when you know that you're Elohim, this is not about somebody else not being Elohim. It's about them not realizing that they are. And in order for that to happen, then we must make sure that when we speak about these things that we are speaking about today, that we are doing it on the basis of spirituality. As above, so is below. This whole thing got torn apart when the Protestant church came into existence, when it introduced race. Now, misogyny has been there forever and a day. So we are turning things right side up. That's our objective, to make things the way, to bring things to the order that they were supposed to be in. And I'm not talking about first, second, and third. I'm talking about the order of consciousness. I'm talking about the balance of consciousness. I'm talking about the same as the Creator brought us into existence. We are to bring into existence not a Caucasian being black or African. No, we're to bring into existence a consciousness that represents the consciousness that we were created to bring into existence. The bigger issue is we have been told that God doesn't exist. And the church has told us that. And it didn't tell us in those words, but the way it told us is how we relate to God. We are told to pray to a God that's external of us, and we can never be God. And even when we die, we are not Elohim, even though we are in Elohim's image. So that is a method that actually covered or overshadowed the reality of our created essence. We have to embrace that for what it is. And if you teach someone that they are free and they buy into being free, you can do anything you want to with them, they're gonna still think they're free, simply because they don't have chains. If you tell people that you have to pray to this external God and Jesus is your way to God, and everywhere you see Jesus, he's a Caucasian. Now, subconsciously, your God becomes the Caucasian male. And that's who you fear, and that's who you serve. But when you see it as it is supposed to be, this is not about skin color. It's about conceptual reality. It's about spiritual reality. All of that begins to change. Does that make sense? All of you, I'm asking the question, that Audrey in particular, since you raised it.
Well, yes, it does make sense.
Okay.
However, if you're saying that we have to do away, well, that people see Jesus as white, so they begin to worship the white male. So if they begin to see Jesus as African, are you saying that changes the mindset?
What I'm saying is, yes, I am saying that. Why? I'm saying that because when you know the truth will make you free. When you know who you are, you know what to hold on to and what to release. When you know who you are, you do not base any concepts on skin color. They were not based on skin color until it was introduced by the European Protestant church. That's when it was based on skin color. So if racism did not exist prior to the interaction with Caucasians making an effort to take over a geographical place with minerals, with everything they wanted. If that didn't exist until then when you know the truth, it will cease to exist, because you won't feel a need to relegate somebody to a subservient position in order for you to rob them of everything that they have or to enslave them. So the African did not introduce slavery, even though the African had the power to do it, because the African was the most dominant group of humans on the face of the earth until the subjugation that the African experienced at the hands of Europeans. This is a manifestation of a spiritual reality. If that had not taken place, then there would be no effort to bring all of humanity to an understanding that it is the image of Elohim. As long as we see God as being a Caucasian or God as being black, that's a problem. When Jesus was teaching about the principles of spirituality, nowhere in that teaching did he ever mention anything about inferiority or superiority based on skin color. Only the European did that. And we are doing the job for that European attitude as we gather in places of worship. When I say European being worshiped, I'm talking about the European male being submitted to. We are submissive to the European male because we have been forced to do that. And it's not just based on race, because the European female is always also submissive to the white male. Everyone on this earth is dominated by the white male, which means that it is a concept of unripeness, and it does not matter who it has to control in order to get what it wants. It's going to do it through murder, rapists, pillaging, doesn't matter. They're going to do it. If you flip the script and look at people like Mansa Musa, who the wealthiest man ever lived, as he traveled, he gave riches to other countries so that they not only could be prosperous, but so that the poverty in those nations would be at least eased, if not eliminated. Does that help, Audrey? Or is that any clearer of what I'm trying to say? And if anybody can help me, please. I welcome it.
Yeah. Good morning, Pastor. I just want to, add to.
George, 1 second. Let me see what Audrey's response. Does that help, Audrey?
It does, and I'm glad you characterized it in terms of it shouldn't be based on any race,
right?
Which you talked about, but because and sometimes even if you change the narrative in terms of race, sometimes it can swing back the whole other way, as we've seen that in certain African American groups. But yeah, I'm glad you characterized it as not being based on any race, because we're all Elohim.
Right.
Anyway, thanks.
Okay, George.
No, I was just gonna, say that, when we talk about race, I think that there's one human race, in terms of humanity. And when you spoke earlier, Pastor, in reference to the question that Audrey had about melanin, I just want to say, when we look at spirituality, before religion, it said that spirituality is unseen science and science is seen spiritually. So when we spoke about the E gene, it talked about scientifically the African woman is the only organism that possesses the mitochondria DNA that has all the variations possible for every different kind of human being on this earth. And it says that when the DNA, of an, African woman, but I'll go back to Akibalan, it says when that woman mutates, all of the other types of human beings come into existence. And so again, in terms of humanity, just something, again, when we talk about the mother of mankind, I think it's taking us back to, that foundation which I think is very important, which I think we're discussing now. So I just wanted to mention those thoughts, in reference to the Eugene again. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone
That
else?
helps.
Okay. Any comments or questions about that?
I was just trying to figure out, listening to what Audrey was saying and even George's response to it. If anything, looking at the differences in us, and I'm not even necessarily talking about skin color, we look at spiritual responsibilities. So I think not so much this group on the phone, but certainly as Africans in the earth, we have because we see ourselves as being inferior, we haven't grasped the thought of what we are responsible for. And if you can ever see that and understand just a little bit of that, to trace that rabbit down the hole, I think that would be the difference. And that is not even from a religious perspective. It's just a thing of knowing who you truly are, and that to me opens up so many more doors. So what we're looking at, to me, pursuing truth is not only spiritual. It's so much more than that. That if I, looking on the outside in, take an interest in this based on the fact that you're showing me the essence of who I truly am, and not even realizing that as I find myself, I find God. That's just takes on a whole another level of understanding to me. And I'm just listening to it. I'm agreeing with you. I'm trying to, just pull it all together, what everybody was saying. So it's not so much a superiority thing on either side. It's just it has been hidden who you are. And we've talked about that. If the African ever comes together and recognize who he is, that's what scares everybody. But it's not. The fear is a military might that you're going to take over. But that's not who we are. If we recognize who we are, just think about the energy and how the world changes for the better, for enlightenment and unity.
Thank you. I want to make sure Angela understand. Well, I have not forgotten her question. The reason I deferred on that is because when we talk about the stone, I want to go through all the temptation, the three temptations, and what they mean. Now, as we were talking, I made the statement: "You shall know the truth, and truth will make you free." What does that talk about? What does that mean? If we understand the meaning of that, then race leaves the equation automatically. If you find out, if you can see the light that emanates, that has its origin in your heart, the enlightenment has its origin in your heart, this enlightenment will lead you in the right direction, and you will know what to hold on to, and you'll know what to release. Meaning that when you become enlightened to what spirituality is, and you understand that the origin of it is not based upon skin color, it's based upon what's in you, your heart, your soul. And when you understand that, and when you embrace that enlightenment, that's when you are led in a direction where your deepest desires are to bring humanity to a place of harmony in order to avoid the destruction that humanity faces if it doesn't. Does that make sense? Does that help clarify what we're talking about? Okay.
It just made everybody think a little, that's all. But yes, it
Yep.
does.
Okay. The question that Angela was raising was, unless there, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Are there any other comments or questions about what we have mentioned? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
When you saying mankind and human, is mankind is everyone, or when you say human is plural?
When I say humanity or mankind, it's just interchanging. Yeah, that's all. Thank you for that, asking that question of clarity. What Angela, anyone else other after Charles, anyone else have a question or comment? Yeah. Apparently, is this clear? Okay, good. Okay. What happened with Angela's question comes on the heel, what she's asking about, rather, it comes on the heel of Jesus having been baptized by John. And that baptism is in the latter part of the third chapter of Matthew. Of course, it's in other forms in other parts of the Gospels. And after the baptism took place, there was it says that Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil, and that leads to the question that Angela was raising. However, there is a question that precipitated that on yesterday when Ron raised the question, something that Ron asked in regards to the oh my God, that Ron asked in regards to the baptism. I think it was. What was that, Ron?
Yeah, the baptism being the catalyst for all this. When you were talking, it just kind of opened up to me to look at that from that perspective, and even the transformation. It looked like from the physical world to the spiritual world, from the old to the new, rather. When he goes through that because that his baptism was a transition, not just a baptism as we know baptism to be with water. Something took place there, and I wanted you to go into that as well.
Okay, I'll do that as we lead up to the response to Angela's question. Okay.
Okay.
When it talks about Jesus being baptized by John, keep in mind this is an allegory. This is telling us, guiding us rather, along this spiritual journey. So this is not about Jackie being baptized and she gave her hand to the preacher, her heart to God, and everything in her life changed, because that doesn't happen. This is talking about when you have gotten to a place where religion is not fulfilling, then you begin to search for something different or better. You don't know what you're looking for because you never experienced it before. So what happened with Jesus in this story is that he fulfilled everything that the religious people said that was supposed to be fulfilled, and that is mikvah. Mikvah was a transformation into the spiritual, the religious sector of what is now called Judaism. It was a group of religious people who were guided by priests who are now known as pastors or imams. And when Jesus was submitted to this mikvah, this baptism, what Jesus was showing us is that this is the journey that brings you to the place of spirituality. And what happened? Once that took place, then John had already said to us what was going to happen. Once he fulfills this mikvah, once he gets this physical material baptism, then you will understand that the water is not going to change you. You will understand that it is a symbol, it is symbolic of change. Because if it was going to change you, once you were baptized, then the spiritual understandings of this race stuff that we just finished talking about would not exist anymore because you would see the truth. Now, he said, you're going to be, one is coming whose shoes I'm not worthy to unlatch. John says that I baptize with water. I am the priest, I'm the pastor, whoever. I'm the immerser. I'm the one who immerses you in water for the express purpose of you being a part of the religious community. Because that's one of the prerequisites. And that's still one of the prerequisites right now. Then John says, the one who comes after me is going to baptize with the Spirit. What he's saying is, the one who comes after me will not baptize with water. He will baptize with the Spirit. And all of us have probably heard this at one time or another. There is no record of Jesus baptizing anyone with water. None. After that takes place, we began to see that Jesus speaks concerning spiritual baptism. And because the essence of his being was brought into this earth for one purpose and one purpose only. And that is to show us when you immerse yourself in spiritual understanding, then the enlightenment that you receive will guide you along a pathway that leads you to a place of beginning, meaning what you were supposed to be from the beginning. That's the same principle in knowing the truth makes you free. Knowing that this enlightenment comes from spiritual immersion, and that enlightenment will guide you on the spiritual journey, and that enlightenment will show you what you ought to hold on to and what you ought to release. And that is the reason that we have released the material connections that we had to congregational settings of religion. And we have held on to the light that emanated from our soul as it guides us along this path, as it guides us in the right direction. That is what truth is about, being guided in the right direction. It is not about the only way to get to God is through Jesus, because he's the truth. It's not about any of that at all. It is all about recognizing what it looks like when you are immersed in spiritual understanding, or when your priority is to be guided by the spiritual energy with which we were created. Does that make sense? Is that clear? Any questions or comments? Ron?
No questions. I understand.
Okay. Does that make sense to the question you raised? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
And it also
Now,
ties in.
Go ahead.
So I was going to say it also ties into the version of in Luke 3, the way that was written. It kind of pulls all that together too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? And then it says that Jesus, after it happened, Jesus was led by the Spirit into a wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Jesus came to baptize with the Spirit. If Jesus came to baptize with the Spirit, are baptized by the Spirit or immerse us in a journey towards our essence, then that means that Jesus was was fulfilling what he was brought into this earth to do, and that is to travel a spiritual journey. So when it talks about being led into the mountain, there are some things that Jesus had to deal with within himself. And regardless of how of how excited we are about being guided by the Spirit, there are things that we have to deal with ourselves. This actual journey into this wilderness was not a journey that made him God. It was a journey that gave him an understanding of who he is. This was a journey of purging the material essence that we think we are, so that we can see the spiritual reality of who we are. Does that make sense? Okay, no questions or comments? Now, it says that in actuality that the tempt of the devil means that it should never have been translated as devil. It should have been translated a stinging mind or his mind, to be to deal with the forgetfulness that is in his mind. And I'll get to the forgetfulness in a moment. This stinging mind, or this aspect of forgetting, that is the part of the mind that sees the material world as the only reality. Meaning that we all have gone through a stage and still going through it, where we have seen a thought that if you were not shouting, if you were not being physically baptized, then you were not, quote unquote, saved. That's that material mind, that mindset that Jesus was being purged of. That's the spiritual mindset that we must be purged of. Is that clear? If there are no responses with comments or questions, then I'm going to think that that is an inference that is clear. Okay. If it's not, please raise the question. Now, what happened is, after that, the scripture says, and when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterwards in hunger. The idea of fasting, the word for fasting is tishum, and it means, that's the Aramaic, and it means that it takes tremendous effort to break through the limits of your flesh, meaning that you are doing all you can, you are fighting as hard as you can, excuse me, to break through your previous beliefs that the material world is the only reality. Now, how does that affect us? What does it mean to us? Every one of us have struggled and still having struggles about embracing in totality the reality of spirituality, as opposed to focusing on the material essence, the material forms in this world. Meaning, we are struggling to purge of all of these religious the religious doctrines, the religious policy that we have been indoctrinated with. It's a struggle to do that, and doing that struggle, what happens? This is not about a physical fasting. This is about a spiritual fasting. And the spiritual fasting means that, well, let me do the physical first. The physical fasting, what we have been taught, is to refrain from eating, right? To put our bodies on through a period where it is deprived of food. The spiritual fasting is when we began to separate ourselves from the doctrines that have kept us or kept our focus on the material world. And that focus includes baptism, communion, all the things that we go through doctrinal. Any questions about that part before I move on? Okay, so when it's talked about him, the 40 days, this is generation, every generation is going through this. Every generation who seeks to travel a journey of spirituality is going through this, meaning there's a purging that's going to take place. There's a battle within that's going to take place. And that battle within is the effort that you put forth to separate yourself from those doctrinal policies that have controlled your life. Is that clear? If it's not clear, please let me know. And those in front of me, please raise your hand if it's not clear. If you don't know how to raise the question. The 40 days is speaking to generation. Every generation who seeks truth is going to go through the same thing that Jesus experienced. And the experience that Jesus had, the message that he's sending to us, the message that the writers is sending to us is, you are going through the same thing that's described here. And the thing that's described here is it had nothing to do with Jesus eating, but it has everything to do with Jesus separating itself from the doctrinal policies that religion had taught mankind. Does that make sense? So right now, that's what we are dealing with. We are dealing with this purging, and every one of us struggle with that. It takes a tremendous effort to push through so that you can truly begin to see with your eye instead of your eyes. Okay, any questions or comments?
So that he became hungry then is he became increasingly wanting to see truth, wanting to search for truth, as opposed to the doctrine that he's walking away from.
Yes, his hunger is no different than our hunger. Our hunger for spiritual truth is reflected in our presence on this line, on these lines, these days that we do this, the questions we raise, the interaction we have with people, even when we're not, on Zoom or coming together. It's your everyday life. That hunger is to live. Let me put it this way. One of the people who probably is on now, who expresses, rather not most expressed necessarily, but expresses the struggles that they deal with in order to be who they know they were created to be. Evelyn always talks about that. This is the struggle that we are talking about. To be who you were created to be, that purging is difficult because that's all we have known through generations, right? It's difficult. So the hunger is there for the understanding of the wisdom that guides us to truth. Does that make sense, Ron?
Yes, it does.
Any other questions or comments?
Hey, this is Nick. Yeah, I think I want to add to that
Sure.
The difficulty of divesting yourself maybe from the habits that are that we have learned over our lives, those things that keep us focused on and enmeshed with a materially focused mindset. Those things are some of the most difficult things to struggle with, not because they seem big or scary, but because we are so used to thinking in those ways and turning our attention to those things and incorporating those things into our sense of being, that they become very, very deeply embedded. And it is very difficult to notice when we are doing those things that keep us spiritually ignorant and focused on things that we habitually want to be focused on, that have to do with whatever, if it's not spiritual, and it could be anything. And I bring that up just because I think that's one of the biggest things that we all deal with in attempting to remember or remind ourselves of who and what we are. And a specific example would be just engaging at on an emotional level with the daily struggles that we have to deal with. That could be just the day-to-day of living life. There's a lot of attachments we put on our sort of daily activities at a deep level that come from our belief that we are only physical. I think maybe explained very simply is a lot of the anxieties that we may have just about dealing with life in general. That comes from a belief that this is at a very deep level, that this is the experience that has dominion over us, as opposed to us having dominion over it in terms of the physical experience or material substance itself. And these things are so simple, but they are so difficult to deal with because they are just so familiar and so ingrained within us. So when you observe your own thinking and your own emotions and your own sort of sense of self as you go about your day or whatever, be aware of, I would say, the fact that you're always in that struggle. You're always in that position where you can recognize sort of how we are attaching ourselves to these physical whatevers and the emotional resonance that attachment creates, the mental state that attachment creates, the belief that it creates within us that our intellectual mind is the sort of the only and the best thing that we have in order to deal with whatever it is we're dealing with on a daily basis. So I just wanted to say all of these habitual things that we have that have become ingrained in us are some of the most difficult to deal with because they are so familiar to us. Thank you.
Nick, and when you said this, we put a lot of emotional attachments on that come from a belief that at a very deep level that this experience has dominion over us. Do you mean this physical experience? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and
what we see with our eyes, what we see, what we want with our mind, the physical that we think is real, that we think is all there is.
Mm-hmm.
So
and
okay.
I of course do the same thing, but it is the need to, and I'm not saying you don't deal with whatever it is you experience, of course, but there is a certain thing that we do while in the midst of this experience, and that is and it creates the belief deeply held within us that this experience is, like I said, that it rules over us as opposed to us are creators of it. And there's, I think, more to that to unpack, but essentially we forget that we are spiritual and experiencing what is physical, and we come to believe that we are physical, and the spiritual is far from us when that is not the case.
Absolutely.
This is Richard. All this has made me think, and I hope this is not too personal or irrelevant, but I just wonder, and I would love to know for the people online, if you could raise your hands. I find, I'm not even quite sure how to shape this, so maybe it's a little premature to say it, to ask the question. But I find in myself, there's just a natural, some of it is accelerated by participation in this group and these conversations, but some of it is just walking through life at my age. I find myself more naturally just, I guess you could say, letting go of a lot of these distractions and distortions, or at least feeling them loosen in me, which makes it easier to take a look at them and just maybe shrug them off a bit, because I don't think in life I've learned you're not here to solve all the problems that you created. There's some value and virtue in just recognizing they haven't been useful and helpful and just letting them go. And then maybe, so my question to the group would be if there are others that have a sense that even if you can't articulate it or you can't reference it in scripture interpretation of this and that, but that as you age, as you gain more experience in life, seasons of a man's life, there's all those expressions, you don't find yourself kind of, well, okay, Audrey, yes, and women, I didn't mean it that way, but you find yourself letting go a bit of some of this, loosening of the knot, if you want, and finding a certain freedom in that. Okay, that's it. I don't know where to go after saying that, but to me, that's all part of a natural process that the Creator has given us. And of course, people can go the other direction and tie the knot tighter, which in itself is not necessarily a bad thing, although it can lead to a moment of crisis, which if maybe managed alone can be quite dangerous, but it can also lead to a breakthrough, a letting go. I guess what I'm trying to say is the nature of things is there to help us through all of this. We don't have to talk it all out, if you know what I mean, but that helps. I'm sorry if I'm not being very, I don't know what, clear.
I understand. You clear.
But that feeling, I think, is a very important one to identify, and for want of a better way to say it, go with. And I know certainly intelligent people on this planet, they don't know half the scriptures and things like that, and yet they have a presence of being that tells me that they don't need to know them. So I'm not saying that as a substitute. I'm just saying I think I find that and as an increasingly important and real underpinning to all of this in myself, because I'm not going to intellectualize all this out. And yet I know I'm moving in a direction that I should be moving in.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Oh, I thought you were finished. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I could go on forever, which means I don't know how to finish, but
okay. Well,
I'm just saying for people who feel the analogy of Gordon, the Gordon knot or whatever it is tied in a knot, all of that loosening plus this encouragement, this kind of discussion, it's all part of, I think, what the Creator has provided for us to help us be free of and let go of. But you go through a stage in life where you look at it very intensely and you get very, this, that, and the other thing. And then, what's the wisdom of a grandparent? Just relax, let it go. And the truth is there. It's that little still voice, right? Anyway.
And all that you said I understand it. However, it does not lead to us embracing who we are. All of this is a material, mental, mindful, logical explanation of you should treat people right. Yet it does not bring balance. It does not bring harmony to the earth. It might, and I express might bring harmony to that individual, but the express purpose of the holy books of all people, indigenous people, the express purpose of those holy writings are for the express purpose of changing the entire family of humanity. It's not simply for people to get older and become what we wiser. Is what we are talking about is so that people will not have to go through the struggles that we have gone through. So people will not be racist. So people will not be misogynistic. That these principles will not be the dominant forces in this earth consciousness. We are not. Our efforts are not to change individual people. That's not going to happen. Our efforts is to infuse in earth consciousness the truth, the reality of what spirituality is, and making every effort to be shown an understanding of the wisdom that has been within the communities of indigenous people ever since there has been people on this earth. So so I do agree that that people do get wiser as they get older, but they don't get more spiritual, and they don't embrace the spirituality, the spiritual essence. I know my family and everyone else is the older people in our family. Yes, we listened to them because they did have wisdom, but what they understood about the scriptures was still the same thing that kept us enslaved, that justified the murder of the indigenous people who were in America before there was an America. It did not free us spiritually, because if it had, then we would not be doing what we are doing now. We wouldn't have to, because everything would be different. So we have sought the wrong sources for that kind of change. We sought the legislative bodies. We sought these, and in the judicial system, we sought them in the office of president, prime minister, whatever you want to call it. But nothing has changed at all. When we raise a question to a European and say, would you change places with me? You can have all the money in the world, but would you be black and me and I be white? And you don't, 99.9% of you don't get an answer. You don't get a response, because nobody want to be black. When that changes, then the consciousness has changed, because the consciousness right now is, I don't want to be black because of the way y'all treated. I do not want to be treated the way you treated. But I'm gonna treat you the way I want to treat you. That does not change anything spiritually. Does that make sense? So when we talk about the idea of breaking through, when we talk about the idea of the struggle that we have, the struggle is a formidable struggle, because, as Nick stated, we are dealing with things in our day-to-day life that has beset us forever and a day. That's all we have known. So it's difficult to separate from them. Now, are there any questions or comments before I talk about the tempter and what that means?
Hello, everyone. It's Sheldon. Hope to not get off subject, but to the what was just said between yourself and Richard, a very, as has been mentioned, a very subtle thing that is taking place is that very thing that one would hope to naturally reach in terms of becoming more spiritual aware of themselves. Those that have a Protestant Christian background have been told not only deny that particular thing, but also that it is, in a sense, bad and not holy, and even of the devil. So, as we're talking about speaking about the scriptures and getting great understanding, if that is something that someone has built their foundation of belief in terms of who they are, is that must be addressed in order for them to get beyond that and move on and to have a more spiritual realization of themselves. So that is a little bit different than those who just become older, and naturally, as they become older, become wiser. This is definitely true that many people outside of Christianity in their own different ways definitely reach a place of spirituality in other ways, but they're also not necessarily dealing with that same blockage that they have been raised to believe and wholeheartedly believe to some extent. And in some ways, not even knowing that they believe it until they have to confront it. I'm finished.
Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments?
Well, good evening. Now, one of the things that I feel, older I get, more I want my load to be lighter. I would like to say wiser, yet that's just something with me. The older I get, the more I want my load to be lighter, because what I'm doing at 52, I ain't gonna be able to do at 58. There's a chance. There's a chance. Yet in that, I do want to be wiser too. And one of the struggles that I had this week, I was talking to my homeboy Golden Graham. And I said, Golden Graham, I'm working this 6th day, this extension day. I gotta save my hours up. And there are ways you can save your hours up. However, it's not ethical. And I just told him, I said, man, I'm going to just shut down here and catch it on up tomorrow. And he stated, don't starve yourself out by staying in compliance. And he also stated you have to know how to starve yourself out and be compliant. So and we talked about that, man, how do you stay in compliance without starving yourself out? So it's just the older I get, the more I want my load to be lighter. And I do see some people, well, they 52, 53 years old, and they trying to raise their children. That's adults. Ain't going to happen. So, yet in it, I do want to be wiser. Reverend Richard, you stated that there are people out here that don't want to be black, or other nationalities that don't want to be black. Man, you got some black folk out here that don't want to be black. There are black folks that I know that would.
I agree. Clarence Thomas is one of them.
Well, yeah, he definitely one of them. Yet there are people that I know, if you would ask them, hey, would you rather be black or Puerto Rican? I tell you real quick, black. I'd rather be Puerto Rican. At least they work together.
I don't want to get into racial comparisons or cultural comparisons, because what we're doing, we're moving away from the spiritual essence, because you said something at the onset that caught my attention. As I get older, I want my load to be lighter. What about the rest of humanity? My load has been heavy all my life and still is. So it's not about my load, it's about our load. It's not about my being older and lightening my load. It is about lightening the load of my children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, everybody who come after that. And as well as those who are live today. That's that lightening of the load speaks to knowing who you are, as opposed to changing your vocation. It has nothing to do with your vocational change, because regardless of whether you are able to continue to work and at the same job for 40 or 50 years, it has nothing to do with your spirituality. It has zero to do with that. So lightening, when we talk about lightening our load, we're talking about the elements of society that puts a burden on everybody who lives in the society. And keep in mind, we are the ones who carry the heaviest load, because we blame for everything that goes on. Statistically speaking, there are more white people who sell drugs and use drugs than black folk. That's a statistically reality, and a statistical reality rather. Yet you will not get even black folk to believe that, because of the way the media projects us. That's a load that we carry that's not ours. Now, to get back to where we were, it says that Jesus was tempted. The tempter came to Jesus rather. Now, what does that mean? This word that's used for tempter is amnasa. And that word comes from the same root as the word for forgetting. So Manasseh is actually the forgetful aspect of self, meaning that this idea of forgetting speaks to our logical mind trying to intellectualize everything. For example, this logic that I speak of is actually a part of who the self is. The book says, when the tempter came, what did the tempter say? If thou be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread. If thou be the Son of God. Now, the if is not coming from a devil, is not coming from anything outside of you. This is an internal discussion, or this is an internal war, or this is an internal reflection on the self that guides the mind, or the soul that guides the self. This is mind and soul. What was shown when that was said, this is the material thoughts of Jesus. This is the material thoughts of Jesus speaking to the logic of the mind. And an example of that is when that statement was made, what it was actually being said is, if you are the Son of God, then you already are in charge of everything. And in actuality, that was the ego speaking. If you're a child of God, you're Son of God, you're already in charge of everything. So whatever is in you, I'm sorry, because of what's in you, turn these stones to bread. What is actually being challenged in Jesus is your insight. Change your insight into something that feeds your soul. If my flesh, if my material nature is from my soul and the source, in other words, if the logic of it is, if my material essence is from the soul and its source, which means the creator, then whatever my flesh wants must be a part of the divine plan. If the logic there is seen and name and claim it ministry, seen in prayer and that kind of thing, because what it's saying is, if I am created by the source, then the source also created my mind. Therefore, whatever my mind tells me I want to do or what I want, then that has to be a part of the divine plan. That's the logic, but it's not the reality. Does that make sense? Come on, help me. Is it clear? Your mind is created by the same one who created you, right? So if you think that because your mind is created by the one who created you, then whatever your mind tells you to do ought to be justified as a divine purpose because where it came from. That's not true. That's the logic of the mind. The mind and the soul are given to humans for express reason. The mind is the challenge to the spirituality. The mind is the material challenge to spirituality because the mind only sees that which is material. The soul looks beyond that and embraces that which is spiritual. And that is the reason your mind can tell you how you should deal with people who mistreat you. And that is, well, if God did not want me to do that, then he wouldn't let the thought be in my mind. However, when you look at it from the spiritual perspective, your soul says that you are to treat people the way you want to be treated. Your soul says that you are to be forgiven. So this is the tree, or this is the opportunity of functionality, what we call the tree of knowledge, good and evil. This dysfunctional is when you feel like you can do anything your mind tells you to do. Functionality is when you're guided by your soul. And if it's your mind, who is the me that the mind belongs to? If it's my soul, who is the me that the soul belongs to? Is self, your inner self, the essence of who you are. You have a choice to make between those two. Is that clear? Because your mind will tell you anything. We've heard it all our lives. We've experienced that. But when you dig to the depth of your soul, because we say they ain't got no soul because what they, like the serial killer can't have a soul because of what they did. It's not that they can't have a soul, it's that they are not responding to their soul. They're responding to their mind and their material instincts. Does that make sense? So when he tells Jesus that, when Jesus rather is shown this, then what happens? Jesus does not respond in a charismatic way, like simply because I want it, God go give it to me. Jesus, the response is, my life is not centered around logic of my daily or bodily needs. Jesus' response is, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth from the mouth of God. Man shall not, my life is not centered around logic, the logical things of my daily life. My life is centered around who I am and not the satisfaction of my material being. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And like I was saying earlier, we become so enmeshed within our sort of physically oriented, intellectual, habitual thought patterns. We need food to live, right? But food is not the source, capital S, of life, capital L. And that is that recognition that must be fed or be allowed to germinate and develop into the true, direct drawing from our spiritual self, which is the true self. And that becomes the core focus on deep inner level, as opposed to the more surface level sort of material things that our mind is used to interacting with. Thank you.
Thank you. So to respond directly to the question that Angela raised at the onset, this idea of turning stone into bread is saying that if you if you are Elohim, if you the essence of who created you, then anything you do is going to be divine, is going to be acceptable. So what it's saying is, you cannot take your material beliefs about your life, about what you want, about how you want to treat other people, and expect to continue this journey of truth, or to expect to embrace the spiritual essence of who you are. You are not reflective of the one who created you if you believe that you can do anything you want to do. The idea, if your eye offends you, pluck it out, right? If you're right hand, if you cut it off, that's literally that's foolish. So your mind says that this is exactly what he's talking about. And then you go pluck your eye out, now you have blind. That's not what he's talking about. But that's how you handle, and you shall handle serpents. Yeah, do that. See how that work out for you. That's not what he's talking about. But your mind, your logic is processing it. So what am I saying in essence? Christianity, Islam, Judaism, all the other isms have used their logical minds in an attempt to process spiritual realities, and that does not work. The processes of spiritual reality, understanding the wisdom of truth, comes from the depths of your soul. So what we've done, when it talks about the tempter, what has happened is our logical mind has led us to forget about who we really are. Can you see that? Logic, trying to justify those things that are unjustifiable, has caused us to forget who we are. When we remember that we are the essence of our Creator, and we endeavor to understand what that means, that's where the change comes. Not just for us, but for humanity. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Any
Sir.
questions? Thank you. Any questions or comments? Anything to add to that? Angela, does that help you?
Makes sense.
I beg your pardon?
Sense.
I cannot understand you. Or can anybody understand what she's saying?
I think she said it
I
makes
said that
sense.
makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we got to the crux of your question, so we could respond to it properly and make sure that you got understanding from it, as opposed to being, left with confusion. Any other questions or comments? Charles?
It's still going back to what we talked about when you make the bread into it's thrown into bread. Now, when he was saying jump off this mountain,
I ain't got there yet. I haven't gotten to that one. I want to celebrate this one first. Okay. Now, I wanted to make sure that we got to the question that Angela raised. I wanted to also make sure that we thoroughly, we looked at I want to also make sure that we had a response of understanding to all the other questions that were raised, regardless of how we had to talk them out. But mainly also to get to the question that was raised in the beginning. Because the avenue that I had said yesterday I want to take is to understand the temptations. And right now, understanding how much time has been put into this understanding, I do not want to go to the others, the last two, until we come back together again. Does that make sense? Are you with that? Because if we get into the other one, we will be here at least for another hour plus, because there's going to be questions. Excuse me. And the questions, you see, we try to be thorough in our responses to the questions. And so if it's okay, Ron, to take a pause here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Any questions or comments on what has been spoken? Okay.
I
That's
just
a
wanted
great-
to add that what Nick was saying is really true, because I can remember when I was in the church, in the Baptist church, and I had several questions that nobody could really answer, but their answer was to give me a copy of the church doctrine. And I'm like, this don't even say the same thing that's in the Bible. So why are you giving me this? But we've been in the church, people have been fed a certain truth that only is truth superficially. And they are made to believe that that is what they should believe and no other. So yes, it's really difficult to get away from that and to let your soul speak to you when the church is telling you, no, you should believe this. And it don't matter what your soul is telling you, this is what we say we believe. So yes, it can be very difficult to put that aside and trust your own internal spirit to lead you to a place where you can get the answers, or to lead you to a place where you realize the truth with a capital T. So I guess I'm just agreeing with and adding to what Nick was saying about it being hard to move away from all the things, the kinds of biases and indoctrination that we've had all our lives. But truly we have to. We really have to if we want to actually know the truth. Anyway, that's it.
Yeah. And we primarily deal with it in terms of the religious indoctrination, but we also deal with it in terms of the confusion that is inherent to participating with this physical experience, and that we think that that is all there is. And it is difficult. And I remember one of the things an example I've given before of the way in which you can examine your own self and attempt to be more aware of to what it is you are attached to on a sort of internal level. A simple example is that when you speak, don't use filler words. So don't say and stuff like that. Why? Because that is just essentially an exercise of learning to be aware of your internal environment and to catch yourself, and in so doing, become more familiar with how to recognize what is going on in your sort of deeper mental space. What are you attaching yourself to? What are your habitual thought patterns and stuff like that? Because it's the same pattern or the same process by which you can become more aware of your sort of deeper spiritual and internal emotional makeup and what that is attached to and what its habits are, be they for positive or negative. So it's the simple things that are a mirror of the deeper things. But you, during the process of spiritual evolution, you work from outside in. But paradoxically, the truth is, working from the outside in is the inside working from the inside to the out. But you don't have to think so hard about that, because there's no point in thinking about that, because it is not a intellectually thing that can be grasped in that way. It is something you do. It is something you experience. It is an awareness you learn to keep awake within yourself. Anyway, thank you.
I thank both of you. As before we depart, I want to make sure that I relate to you what came to me during the course of trying to understand these temptations. Understanding these temptations puts us on the same page, because we understand from these temptations that nobody has arrived. We're still on the journey, and what it looks like to be on the same page is the effort that not the task that I've been given in explaining the understandings of these three temptations. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Is that it? I think we've had a lot to think about. A lot of stuff is, and don't forget our meditation, our energies. Until enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll meet again tomorrow at 6 p.m. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Release it all. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.